Now, I know what you're thinking. Hang on, the Soviet Union had elections, but wasn't it a one-party state? Well, yes, but that didn't mean that you couldn't vote, and the USSR had many elections open to the wider Soviet public. Now, the nature of these votes did change over the decades, and as such, we're going to focus on the years when the USSR was run by Joseph Stalin, since he's not really one you would associate with democracy. So, citizens of the USSR elected representatives to the Supreme Soviet, the legislative arm of the government, and these elections were held every 4 years. And the process for these elections was fairly simple for citizens. When polling day arrived, they would go to their local polling station and they would receive their ballot, which would only have one candidate on it. To most people, the fact that you could only pick from one Communist Party approved candidate doesn't seem very democratic, and that's because it isn't. However, these elections weren't without their purpose, and in some ways it did give ordinary Soviet citizens a voice in how the USSR was run. Before that, it's important to say how candidates were selected and what this meant for how the USSR operated after these elections. Obviously, you couldn't get onto the ballot without the express consent of the Communist Party, and the vast majority of candidates were Communist Party ones. Some were independent candidates, which gives a nice bit of variation, providing you ignore the fact that they were also communists and would agree with the Communist Party on everything. Also, in case you're wondering, the reason why all candidates stood unopposed was that the party wouldn't allow itself to appear divided. And just so you know, here's how the voting process would work. 1. You'd turn up at the polling station. 2. You'd receive a ballot that would have the name of your candidate on it. 3. You'd place that ballot in the ballot box and that would be counted as a vote for the candidate. But what if a person didn't wish to vote for the candidate on the paper? Well, then they were free to enter the voting booth and scribble out the candidate's name. But then everyone would know that you did it because you were one of the few that kept their ballot a secret. So with elections being run in this way, then surely there was no point of them. Well, actually, no. For the state, they were used to demonstrate popular support for the Communist Party and its policies. High turnout meant that it was widely popular, which it could use to then demonstrate to the rest of the world that it had popular support. This is why the government went to such lengths to get people to vote, and if you were unwell, they'd bring the ballot box to you. So how did these elections benefit ordinary people? Well, here's the thing. Communist candidates could fail to be elected despite it being a one-horse race. You see, if a candidate failed to get 50% of their area's vote, be that from spoiled ballots or low turnout, then they weren't elected and a new candidate was brought forward. Knowing this, Soviet citizens would often band together and make petitions for local changes, and if they weren't met, no one went out to vote. Thus, if said representative wanted to keep their nice political job, they had to do something. So, in essence, Soviet democracy wasn't really a democracy, but it would be wrong to say that these elections were nothing more than a farce and a waste of time. Soviet citizens were smart about using them to get local improvements that they needed. It may not have been particularly democratic since you couldn't vote the Communist Party out of office, but it did, in a very small sense, give you an input into how things were run. I hope you enjoyed this episode and thank you for watching, with thanks to my Patreon supporters whom you can see on screen now. Plus with an extra special thanks to James Bisonet, Danny Maloney, Coolin Castleman, Party Boyko, Rob Waterhouse, Mo, Aaron the White, Michael Reynolds, Chris Wicker, Gustav Swan, Urshwayan Emperor, Gareth Turner, David Silverman, Spinning Three Plates, Maggie Pakskowski, Christian Cheke, Spencer Lightfoot, Winston Kaywood, Anthony Beckett, Kelly Moneymaker, Robert Wetzel, Lexi Schwinn, Sky Chappelle, and Ike.